which you know, Jared, more active care focused. I would say passive care, probably actually, instead of doing that first, I would do that a little bit later down the road with a lot of people. Obviously, it depends on the person in front of me, but if their expectations aren't necessarily tissue work and adjust, then I'll just hop right into active stuff. And then later down the road, if there's more of a need for that stuff for pain modulation, then we'll jump into that. But yeah, so far it's been great. I'm the only one in my place. I opened it up, like I said, in February and started an S corporation and just kept it lean and mean, and everything's been going good despite COVID.
I was gonna say that's amazing that you're keeping it going well when you just opened right before all these restrictions and lockdowns started kind of rolling out. So
not great timing, and if I'm being honest, I was a little scared in the first couple of weeks there, and I was even considering like Home Depot, Trader Joe's. I was looking at I was like, the joint will probably pay me the most per hour. It's not what I want to do. And then a couple of weeks rolled in and went by and things started picking up. I think the lack of activity, people started having more pain.
Kind of worked out, but that's awesome. You almost had to consider doing what you got to do, to make some sort of income, things like that. Thank you guys for sharing all that. I guess to kick it off, since it's sort of on that topic, for whoever wants to take it first and then kind of run with it, what were some of your major concerns or fears as you're looking at graduations in 1 week, 2 weeks, of what to expect in terms of starting out practice, looking for a job, if you didn't have anything set, what was just some of your major concerns and fears that you had before graduation?
You guys want to go in the same order?
Yeah, let's let the old dog go first.
Yeah. Oh man, I forgot what it felt like already. No, I just remember being very fearful of red flags and running into cases that would stump me. Those type of things really freaked me out. Thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't seen anything too insane, or I haven't missed anything too insane, I should say. So that was definitely a fear coming out. Obviously starting from scratch with zero clientele, nowhere to practice. I didn't have a spot. I was actually, my first client ever was out of my apartment. So that was also a worry. But things fall into place, man, when you go out there and you make it happen. You gotta be aggressive coming out. And I just went out there to a couple gyms. I didn't even ask if they were hiring or offering spots. I was offered a spot to myself. And I just jumped in and started right away.
Awesome. Anyone want to add anything to that?
I mean, I can't add to it, but I can just go so you don't have to keep in between, Jared. But my situation's pretty different. I mean, graduating December 2019, COVID wasn't a thing, right? So it wasn't even on your mind. But I was in a situation where I didn't know exactly where I was going to end up after grad, and everything kind of happened in a way to fall into place that I was coming back to the Okanagan. I'm from the Okanagan over here in BC. And I actually started in a different clinic than the one I'm in now. So I started up essentially in what was a high volume clinic, and they wanted to bring me on as the one active care person. And it was, at that point, I didn't really have a whole lot of fears over patient load because I knew that I was walking into a full schedule. That was not the issue for me. I think my biggest fear was essentially how I was going to mesh with the rest of the team. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more after, but that obviously ended up leading right into COVID and then a unique opportunity to join a different team. And then my fears joining a different team were essentially flipped upside down. And it was, okay, where am I going to get the patients from? How am I going to market myself in a time where everything's shut down? Walking into a new city for me, I hadn't lived in for many years, so my fears kind of essentially flipped completely on end. So I had a little bit of both of those worlds. And then, yeah, like we'll talk about the rest of the stuff a little bit later, I think. But yeah, that was pretty much mine.
Yeah, I think for me, I lived in Reno for about 6 years before I moved down to chiropractic school. So I had actually a pretty big advantage, I think, of a community that I kind of built owning a CrossFit gym beforehand. But man, I'd say that the uncertainty was really tough because I didn't know where I was going to go either. Whether it was going to be associate, whether I was going to do my own thing. I prepped my office at home to see patients, and that's where I started seeing my first few patients was at home. And then it kind of just fell into my lap. I ended up treating someone that was a member at this gym and had really good success. And then this opportunity at American Iron just opened up, and it all just kind of worked out at the right time. So as far as fears go, I think paying the mortgage was the big one, because I came back to a house that I bought about 6 years ago, and paying a mortgage with no patience is a little difficult. So I luckily was able to build the patients up so fast where I didn't have to have a second job and get by. And then the red flags, I would second that with Jeremy a little bit with that. And also having a referral network around me to where to send those people if there were red flags. And I'm still working on that. I'd say that's probably the thing I'm the worst at, is having someone to basically triage the patients to, whether it's a neurosurgeon or whatever. And I think that just takes a little bit of time. And that's an area that I wish I could improve on a little sooner, I'd say.
Same here. Still searching.
I guess on that topic, like, what are some of the avenues you're trying to kind of build that network for you, especially like if you're in a new city or town, or if you're not familiar with like the providers around you? Is it just kind of cold calling, showing up at the offices, or like what's?
I've had a couple of clients put me in touch with other doctors, and some of them have worked out, some of them haven't. But yeah, I've had some of them just, because I'm in a gym as well. I forgot to mention that. I'm located in a gym, and during COVID, and actually a medical doctor reached out to me and asked if the gym part was open, and we started talking that way. And so he sent me a couple clients. I'm working on sending him a few, but yeah, it's really tough actually to find people around the area that you trust with your clients, because when you send them out, like, it's a reflection of you as well. So you got to pick wisely.
It's a bit of a different experience for me here, just in Canada in general. Almost everything has to, well, I'll speak for BC, but almost everything has to go through their family physician, the general practitioner. So building the relationships with a specialist, for example, doesn't really happen. And it's not necessarily as important. It's more so about finding that first point of entry doc, because we don't necessarily act as them all the time. And that's the nice part about going into a clinic that's already established, is we already have physicians in town that refer us patients. They just know what they're going to get. And that's just something that the clinic owner developed over time. So that's not something that I've really had to deal with myself. And then everybody here pretty much, for the most part, has their own doctor, and it's probably their doctor they've had since they were a baby. So they love them, they trust them. So you're not really going to get anybody to change in that sense, and that's not the goal. So most of the time it's, it makes my job a little less hectic, because if I think they need an image, I can't request it in BC, so I basically have to tell them to go and talk to their doctor. So it can be a little frustrating in that sense, but for that reason that the clinic's been established, I don't have to worry necessarily too much about trying to reach out and get involved and get connections with docs.
Yeah, again, similar situation to Jeremy, because we're kind of in the same type gym model. I think I've gotten good connections for other medical doctors through old clients. One in particular is a very well-known and respected orthopedic trauma surgeon in Reno, and he knows everyone. So that's actually been a big source for me. It's like, hey, you got a hand guy? Okay. You got a spine guy? Okay, great. What do you got for knees, hips? And obviously I'm not referring people a ton, but it's just nice to have right then when you need a second look, you know. But obviously the orthopedic surgeon and I probably have some different viewpoints on a lot of things. So whether or not I'm sending them to the right person it's tough to know for sure. But so far I've had good feedback, and the people I've worked with have been great. Although I don't get anyone back. So I'm referring people, I'm not getting referrals back. And I think the biggest reason is I'm not in network with any insurance at this time. So getting referrals for an all cash-based practice, I think, is a little tough.
You're not showing up at like hospitals or doctor's offices with like cake.
What's that?
So you're not just showing up to like doctor's offices with like a cake and some treats.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet. I know Seb's made some of his interns do some stuff like that.
Haven't gotten there yet.
That's so 2006.
So I don't see any questions kind of coming in the chat yet. So I mean, I can keep on firing away unless Tasha, you want to jump in if you have one.
Yeah, I do have one. I think that you guys practice a lot differently than a lot of the old school chiros. And I think being in the settings that all of you guys are kind of creates a specific patient population. But how do you navigate the old like chiro narratives of like, oh, you're seeing a chiropractor, so you have to like adjust or you have to do soft tissue? Like a lot of times that's what a lot of people go to the chiro for, instead of active care and rehab and programming and staying involved in like other realms of life rather than just the adjustment. So how do you face those narratives of patients that come in expecting that? Like, do you have to have a lot of like educating consultations, or what do you guys do?
It's actually insanely more common than you would think. So I have this conversation basically every session with every client interaction. And in the beginning, I usually start off with like at least 30 minutes of us getting to know each other. And I'll find out what their expectations are, always what their goals are and stuff like that. And then I get a bit of picture of like how they're perceiving the session to go. And I'll take that information and kind of like, I'll kind of hide it in there. And I'll explain how I do things and why I'm different. And that's actually a good point in the conversation where you can like market yourself and why you're different and why you're unique. So I actually look forward to that conversation now. I used to be petrified of that because it's definitely going against the grain. Like, even though we think that like everybody now is starting to practice this way, we're still like a very small circle. So it used to intimidate me, and that was probably another thing I should have mentioned, like coming out of school, like definitely going against the grain and trying to have that conversation with people, because you're most likely not the first chiropractor they've been to, or at least clinic. So they're expecting like, they already have these expectations in their head. So I always find out what those are and what their end goals are. And then, yeah, definitely a huge part of the session is communication. And I wasn't, especially like leaving school, I felt like my communication skills were terrible. And so throwing myself into the fire, just going into the real world by myself, one-on-one with somebody, nobody to coach me through it. I think that was my best, like personally, that was the best way to grow for me, because I honestly wasn't that good at it. So that's my input.
Yeah, it kind of tears you a little bit. I'll say that. So on one end, like Jeremy said, they have an expectation, right? Somebody's coming to a chiropractor. There's ingrained expectations of what that service is going to be. And remember, they're paying for it too, right? So when you just talk financially and you want to maintain a practice where you can pay the bills, right? you need that person to believe what you're saying enough to come back. So sometimes that means shutting your mouth, doing a little bit of the passive shit that you don't like doing, and trying to find your area to start changing their narrative. And a lot of that comes down to how good you are at your reported findings and how much you can explain to them that, you know, really, this isn't what's causing your issue, it's something else. And this is how we can treat that. Yeah, I'll do some of this other fluffy stuff. I'll rub you a little bit, but at the end of the day, we need to work on this other stuff too. And even just saying that, you're already so different than somebody else. When I came back to Canada, I had this idea that everybody in the States was old school and treatment plan this, treatment plan that. Not in Canada. I would say it's probably worse here. And that was a big shock to me. How many clinics in Kelowna still sell treatment plans that are $2,500, whatever. That's going to change in the new year. But anyways, I was shocked. So a lot of people come in and they're like, you know, I went to this other place, they took x-rays and they wanted me to pay whatever. And it's like, if that person's been seeing that service for, 10, 15 years and you all of a sudden come in and don't adjust them, for example, they're going to walk out and they're going to find the chiro that's going to adjust them. So it takes time and experience, and you're going to screw up a lot, and that's how you'll figure it out. And that's the shitty short answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go about it. Similar to what I'm going to say. I start by collecting kind of some data in the intake form. So everybody that comes in, before they come in, they have to fill out a pretty extensive online intake form. And that includes, like, what are your expectations? What have you been told about your pain? What do you think is going on? A lot of low back cases, or I see a lot of low back cases, so I'll send them the start back questionnaire. That kind of looks at some of the yellow flags. Are there some biopsychosocial things that maybe we need to address? And then obviously just talking to the patient once they get there and trying to find an entry point, right? Just like rehab process, we need to kind of find an entry point on reshaping their beliefs. Now, if we talk and they seem like they're very stuck in, let's say, like, my pelvis is out of place and I just needed to check this, and I can tell that visit one, maybe I don't need to really go there as far as trying to convince them otherwise, then I think it's more of like a reassurance approach during the exam by saying, like, no problem, during the exam, we'll check all this out and I'll let you know what I find. And then obviously, I'm not thinking I'm going to find their pelvis out of place, but I might have them on the table talking to them what I'm feeling. And, I'll say, actually your joints and soft tissues, they feel pretty damn strong and robust. And I don't really see anything wrong here. I think, we have the green light to move forward with the rehab process. Now, if the patient kind of already seems skeptical about what they've been told in the past, and they're like, yeah, this one doctor told me my leg's too long and my vertebrae is out of place or whatever, but I don't know. What do you think about it? Then I think that's a perfect opportunity to just kind of step in and give them, your current understanding of the evidence and just have a conversation about it. So there's no great answer there. It's just meeting the patient where they're at, right?
Yeah, perfect. With that, a lot of it comes down to, you guys all mentioned, like, communication, and that's like the biggest part of changing that narrative. And you guys have kind of fumbled and found your way outside of school, but is there anything that you would maybe recommend to a lot of these students that are on this call, things that they can do starting now to try to, like, itch that way, instead of like, oh shoot, we're in practice and now I'm talking to people and trying to change it?
That's tough. I would say for that type of practice, it's not the best advice, but it's the only one that I would say that I can relate to would be, like, start personal training people, because you get that one-on-one interaction, whether it's, I don't know, just regular training, sports, yoga, I don't know, anything like that type of stuff, where you're interacting with random different people. I think that would be the best practice for that type of interaction.
I think for me, it's hard, but a couple things you can do. I think one of the biggest problems with a new grad is they always worry about time, and they don't want to take a 60-minute initial and then not have enough time to do all this super cool rehab. The better you get at an exam, the more time you'll have to explain and fumble your way through some explanation. So what I would say is, like, we use Jane in our clinic, and Jane has templates, and you guys wouldn't know that, but basically think of like what your low back exam is going to look like. And for me, I've done a lot of continuing ed, and I've sprinkled little bits of everything, and I do a little bit of everything. But everything that you do in your exam should help your justification after, if that makes sense. So outcome measures, for example, are huge. Like, if you're going to tell somebody that they have like a weak core, for example, did you even test their core? That's a really easy way to like roll right into your report of findings. And then I think a big one is learn how to explain things to certain professions. So engineers are super simple, right? You just explain thing mechanically, levers, moments, load, distribution, super, super simple. But your stay-at-home mom isn't going to understand that when she holds her arm out in front of her, there's more of a moment about her pelvis, right? So practice explaining whatever you want to explain. It's kind of that cheesy, like, salesman, like, sell me this pen bullshit. But at the end of the day, that's what you're doing, right? So try to envision yourself talking to different professions and learning how to relate to them so that they can understand it. Even just saying something that maybe isn't even what you thought was like the big be all end all, and having them understand that, like, oh, okay, I can't manage load properly through this spot. If they can convey that and they can understand that, then you already have them essentially with you. And I think that's a hard thing to practice, but just something you don't even really need to, like, I'm not going to say go and drill it by any means, but it's just something to start thinking about as you're going through, student clinic and all that stuff. Start, like, try through your exams and whatever, get good at that stuff. It just takes reps, but think of, how you're going to explain stuff to various types of professions. I think that's going to help everything.
Yeah, I think Ben brings up a good point. The person in front of you it's so different depending on profession, and it's going to depend on what are their current beliefs, what have they been told in the past, and like if they're more of a biomechanical kind of thought process behind what they believe in, then you're going to probably explain it a little bit different than you would to like a nanny or something like that. But I would say that drilling actually, I feel like drilling helps, because I'm not a great speaker by any means. But I've found that, when I did a lot of Instagram videos in the past, just having the camera on my face and then re-listening to it, you're like, man, yeah, that's not very clear. I should probably, retake that like 30 times until my point comes across more clear and more precise. Because what I tend to do is in the past, I probably still do, is I just kind of tend to run on, and then I lose people. So being quick and to the point, I think, is important with patients. And also just not interrupting, I think, can be really one big one. What I try and practice with myself is a new patient exam. I book out 90 minutes actually, and I'm not really too concerned with how much hands-on stuff we get in that 90 minutes. Sometimes I just see how long I can go without even interrupting them and just completely listening. Because I think most of us, and I don't know the data on this, but most of us end up interrupting within like the first 30 seconds to a minute. So I think the less we can say and the more we can just listen, show body language that's understanding. And then after they convey their concerns, reiterate it to them and say, so I'm hearing that you're concerned about your pelvis being out of place. It sounds like you've been to all these different offices and you've got all these different opinions. And what can I help you with most? Well, it sounds like a lot of what I can help you with is just kind of some reassurance and education, and then go from there. I don't know if that gives a great answer, but I think the thing that I've improved on the most in this 9 months of practice is actually communication.
Yeah, communication is super important. So I do like those analogies, and also not interrupting. That's super important. I remember there is a research article about that. I think it's like within the first 2 minutes, which is crazy. We always just want to tell somebody what's going on rather than letting them kind of fumble through it. So you guys are in gyms. Ben, you're in a clinic that is a big gym essentially. Do you have a hard time with your patient population creating buy-in for those people with rehab? Because I'm assuming that maybe you guys have a lot of athletic population. With the rehab, do you find that it's easy for them and they tend to do their exercises, or is it something that you continually have to review with them and go through it with them?
Thankfully, I've marketed myself. Like, I think I posted my first adjustment on my social media 1 month ago. So people know what to expect from a rehab standpoint and from like an exercise standpoint. So that's a positive. So I think if you're starting your own brand out of school or your own clinic, make that very clear as to what you want, so that, you know, random people that find you online or however they find you already have an expectation of what's going to happen in that session. In terms of buy-in, I've worked on this a lot as well in the past year, actually since I started. It's having that intro conversation of what everybody's goals are, expectations, and all of that, because I am a cash-based practice as well. I do accept out-of-network insurance benefits because New Jersey is one of the states that is actually worth doing. So that's like a very small percentage of my practice. But it is tough to convince people to pay cash, and especially if you're, you know, offering packages up front for a cheaper price per session. All those things play a role. But I think in terms of having people buy in, make sure that your brand represents the people that you want to attract, because those type of people will show up, and if they're expecting to move better, like most people I deal with want to get better, and it's the powerlifters, CrossFit, even like the hard. I'm in a really nice gym where, for some reason, 40 to 50 years old, they train harder, especially the females train harder than most males I know my age. So it's a very it's a very good place to be in. And I just couldn't be more grateful for the spot I'm in. So hopefully, you know, you find a location like that if that's the crew you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is just going to be a little different just because of Canada, and insurance is a lot better and there's a lot of coverage and all that stuff. So just know that that's very different here. But for the most part, because our clinic is marketed as a health clinic, I get everybody from professional athletes to 70-year-olds that don't even barely walk. And that's kind of what I enjoy. Like, I like the challenge of getting, you know, somebody that doesn't move to buy into a little bit of exercise. And it just means that the rehab's not going to be super sexy. Like, I remember in school, it was always like, you know, you go to some like DNS seminar or whatever, and you're working on all this IAP, and you get all these crazy cool compensation patterns that sort of dissolve, and you're just like, nice. And then you get out and you give somebody like a glute bridge, and they're like, oh my God, my fucking low back feels so good. And you're like, okay. You know, so it's not sexy, but it's all part of just like, we kind of talked about it before. It's meeting that person where they're at. And I know this is beating a dead horse a little bit, but you know, if they have an expectation of passive care, it's okay, I'll give you a little bit of your expectation so that I make you happy, but I'm also going to give you something you didn't think you were going to get. And then I'm going to slowly stop doing the passive care stuff, and you're going to continue to get better. And then your buy-in is there. You don't even really need to, you know, you don't need to reiterate it every time. It's okay. maybe I start spacing treatments out and they're literally just working on the small little like 5 exercise program that I gave them. And then they come back and they're like, it feels great. And it's like, perfect. Then they have that short little chunk of, 3 things to have in their pocket, and then they can just keep it. I have a lot of guys, just for whatever reason recently, that are manual labor guys. I'm not going to program them a full intensive exercise routine, because they're not going to do it after they go and they work 10 hours of manual labor. But it's like, okay, what are like 3 exercises that I can give you that are going to be the most beneficial for where you're at right now, that you can do in the least amount of time? And you can understand that just doing 5 minutes of this, you're going to feel way better than having to see me for the next 5 to 6 weeks for passive care. So it's like, it's starting small and just incorporating it when you can. I have other people too that it's just literally the entire session is programming or whatever, and that's fine. But those people are already bought in. Like, those aren't the ones that you have to worry about. It's the ones that have these expectations of something else, and it's just finding little avenues where you can plug stuff in, and then just continuing on that spot.
Man, I think this brings up a lot of interesting points, because I originally, before I started practice and throughout the start part or the first few months, it was all like rehab and corrective exercise. And then Jared and Jeremy obviously know, like, the last couple months, I've just been posting adjustment videos. And that was basically by people asking for that kind of stuff. And what's interesting about it, and I go back and forth on it almost every day, is like, am I causing harm? Am I helping people? Am I doing neither? Where should I go with the social media stuff? And it seems like I don't really have people very often coming in just looking to be adjusted. And I don't know if that is because I started my brand from early on and I was pretty clear about being movement-based, or if it's just because the population that I see is mainly powerlifters, CrossFitters, bodybuilders, skiers, mountain bikers, and this and that. So you guys I'd be happy to hear your input on your thoughts on my Instagram page. But the way that I look at it, even if these people do contact me because they saw an adjustment video, it opens up a discussion where I can kind of educate them and demystify the chiropractic adjustment. And if they do end up coming to see me in the office, I would rather have them come see me than go see someone that's only going to adjust them. And that's where I look at it, is they're going to go probably find someone that pops their neck anyways. Why not come to me, and we can either pop your neck, or maybe I'll just say you don't need it, and introduce a whole different side of care that maybe you didn't know was possible, because you probably don't need the neck adjustment. But as far as buy-in goes, I know I got a little off track there. Man, that was the original question, right?
Yeah.
I have a difficult time with buy-in. I'm kind of in the same situation as Jeremy again. A lot of similarities there. The people are paying quite a bit of money to come see me. So the motivational thing it's not really an issue. But I don't really tell people, like, I'm going to prescribe you these set exercises and you can't deviate from this at all. I think what I try and give people is really more options, if anything. And when I give them the options, maybe on the follow-up visit, the first one, I'll say, okay, out of the things I gave you and suggested, which things do you feel like worked really well and you felt better afterwards? And which things did you really enjoy, if any? And then we kind of come up with a shared decision-making plan. It was like, okay, well, maybe we just cut those out and maybe you don't need those at all. And then we'll keep this group. And then if you're okay with it next time, we'll just progress you a little bit. So I think the specificity with these exercises, I don't really think they need to be that specific a lot of the times. I think it's just giving people options, and then it's the whole Greg Lehman thing is like, do we poke into pain a little bit, right? Or do we let shit calm down and then build it back up? And it seems like for most of my population, we need to let shit calm down a little bit because they've been poking into it for years.
Tangents are welcome.
I answered the question.
So with the scenarios that you guys have and being rehab focused, when you have patients that come in and they've kind of graduated from clinical care, do you carry these patients on now into, say, clients, and now you're programming for them? I know that you guys have a lot of like CrossFitters or powerlifters that may already have a coach, so maybe you make that relationship with the coach. Or do you have a network that you can refer them out to people that could be their new coach to like develop a exercise plan? Or do you guys enjoy making exercise programs for people beyond what it's worth? And if you do that, do you charge them differently for that? Like, how does the cash-based work or insurance-based work with that sort of scenario? So I guess that's like 2-3 questions, 2.5, I don't know.
Those are really good questions. This is something that I struggled with for a while, like coming up with a price, because first of all, I'm in a gym with trainers who I actually finally really trust. So I have no problem referring in-house. Secondly, I love the training myself, so I have that to bobble with. And then price. In the beginning, I used to do different prices for an initial, different prices for a session, different prices for training, different prices for nutrition. At this point, I'm charging per hour for everything. And it goes down per session if you obviously do like a longer term package or something like that. But I'm doing price per hour, and I'm sticking to it because I honestly don't want anymore the strictly training people. If they do, they're paying as much as they would for a medical session, a medical rehab session. So I'm keeping that the same. The thing I'm charging a little bit less on is the monthly online programming. And that's still rehab based. Some of it flirts with strength training just because of the people that I get, but they typically use that as like their warm up, their prehab, or their post training cool down. They'll do some stuff, but that's typically like what I program for people. And did I miss anything? Is that good?
Yeah, no, I think that was perfect.
Yeah, your answers are so nicely concise and to the point. It's almost like you have another year under your belt or something. So I think for me, it just comes down to, time invested versus return, right? Think of it financially. To program somebody, say for a year, like that's going to take quite a bit of time, especially if you're trying to make it specific to what their goals are and everything. But do you want to be a trainer or do you want to be a clinician, right? So for me, for some people, I will program a little bit of stuff for, but I'm not making them an intensive, like something that they stick to. I have a guy that I trust in town that does a lot of nutrition coaching. And then we work with a pretty big strength and conditioning gym in town that if anybody needs like legitimate programming with one-on-one training, I just send them to. It's just something that, for me, I enjoy doing that stuff. So for some people I will do it, but for the most part, I want to spend most of my time doing the thing that I went to school for so long. And I'm not going to make as much money at the end of the day programming and treating than I will if I'm just treating, because I'm not going to start, kind of like Jeremy said, I'm not going to start finicking around with different price points for different services because you just get overloaded with it. And at the end of the day, it's just not worth it for you in terms of how much time you got to put in. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I was a trainer for 6 years before chiropractic school, and then on and off during school. So I kind of left that behind too. What I started playing with over the past few months, when I started to see a bunch of shoulder cases, and I didn't really think that they needed to come in and see me into the office very frequently, was like a 40-minute follow-up, or there would be the initial assessment, we'd talk, go through the regular thing. I'd see what movements they're currently sensitive with, range of motion stuff, whatever. Tried to find an entry point. And then I created a 3 to 4 week Excel spreadsheet. And then we just checked in every 3 or 4 weeks in office, and I charged my same in-office rate, and then progressed the program that way. That was kind of my idea, to try and make care a little bit more accessible to people that maybe had less financial resources. So more self-management, or more stuff for them to do at home. And that was basically just something I did over the past few months, and it's actually worked really well. But as far as after clinical care, long-term rehab programs, and or just basic personal training or strength and conditioning, I don't do that at this point.
I just wanted to kind of touch on that. I think one of the reasons why I don't do that is that at the end of the day, over the year, one of the things I've learned is that in general, just getting somebody to move is better than getting them some specific corrective. And that's what research shows too. So when you kind of factor all that stuff in, it almost devalues all that programming you thought you were going to do, because at the end of the day, if they just went out and walked for 45 minutes, they might get the same benefits from you programming a 3-week whatever program for them. So that's just something that I kind of just thought of at the end there.
I think that the struggle, and you guys might have some insight on this, the struggle for a shoulder program, for example, is how do you implement that into someone that's already doing CrossFit 5 days a week? And that's the hard part, because they're probably more than they need to.
Yeah, and try telling them to not do CrossFit for a week.
Yeah.
Not a chance.
That's the only reason why I even entertained programming, is because you get enough people where you see their program and you're like, Jesus, what's going on here? So I think if you want to take a deeper dive into somebody's true training and exercise background, you have to look at their programming, and then you just kind of, like you said, you communicate, you see what you can throw in, throw out, and use as a warm up or something, and keep trying to build up a better capacity.
Yeah, a lot of times people when they get injured, they have a lot of additives rather than taking stuff out. And I think that's a huge role for us as clinicians, is to help moderate their training programs. Somebody asked, does that open the doors to educate the trainers, what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think there's a huge market in that. I think that's a phenomenal idea. Long term, I think that was something that I wanted to do. Before I go on to that, I wanted to touch on something real quick. Something that popped up for me personally is a problem I ran into was I started becoming more of the training guy instead of the pain guy. And so I quickly exited my networking group, where I wasn't allowed to be the chiropractor because there was a chiropractor already there, and got away from basically
loser.
Yeah, basically he was very salty. I basically got away from being just the personal trainer and exercise guy, because first off, I don't want that. I think what we do is a lot more valuable than that, and getting someone out of pain and being known for that is much more valuable. So I cut that out quickly, and that's kind of why I stopped doing the personal training programs and stuff like that. And like I said, I have a bunch of people surrounding me that have way better experience, probably a lot better at coaching, especially long-term for people. So I like to refer those people out. But in terms of education for trainers, a person in my original networking group started doing that, and it worked out really well because he made even more friends and referral networks. So I think that that's a huge bonus in the future.
I think, yeah, it opens the door. The problem with trainers, especially long-term trainers, is they think that they're the absolute shit. And sometimes it's just you just can't get anything through. So for me, the ideal is a kin student, for example. We have a kinesiologist in our clinic, somebody that has no idea about anything yet, that you can kind of shape and mold. is kind of like the ideal situation. Educating another person who is basically, that's their career, you know, especially if you're a new doc and they know that you're a new doc, that's a very hard conversation to have, to just kind of walk in and be like, hey, look at my shiny plaque. Don't do that. And they'll be like, well, I've been doing that for 40 years and I've been, you know, whatever, I pay the bills. So it's a unique opportunity. And I think if you have good trainers, then you're fine with it. But I think if you go into a town where you maybe don't have a network built yet, it's a bit harder of a conversation to have. And that's why it's important to kind of, with trainers, it's a little bit different than medical providers, but with trainers, you know, like very much not a cold call, it's a bit old school, like slide in the DMs maybe, but try to get a meeting with one. That's how I met my guy that does nutrition stuff, is I literally just sent him a message and was like, hey, do you want to meet for coffee or something like that? I mean, this was before a lot of the lockdown stuff, but just pick their brain, see where they're at. You know, there's nothing wrong with just having a conversation with somebody. And if you don't want to work together, that's fine. But I think when you don't have a network of people, you know, sometimes a little bit harder of a conversation to have.
I think to build off that answer, so you can answer this one as well, is going to refer to a trainer. What do you personally look for in their approach?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'll just, since I was just yapping away. I think for me, I don't care too much about anything other than the fact, are they going to hurt the person that I'm sending them? And are they going to tell them some stuff that's going to contradict what I want them to do? I used to be a huge stickler on training type, technique, whatever they do. But at the end of the day, if that person goes to that trainer and they get exercise in for 60 minutes, that's super, super valuable. If they're not going to hurt my patient, set them back, and they're not going to cross anything that I say, that's fine. Anything on top of that is just a huge bonus. Like, it just depends on where you are. In Kelowna here, you know, I would love to find like some FRC, whatever based trainer, but that's just not a reality. We don't have them. So we have the online personal training certification guys here. You know, if I can find one of those guys that isn't going to, you know, undo what I want to do, then that's a good person for me. And these guys probably have a different experience than that.
Yeah, I think obviously it's going to depend on your goals collectively with the patient. Do they have a difficult time being motivated? Because if they have a difficult time just moving and being motivated in general, I might try and send them to someone that maybe I worry less about what they'll do with them and worry more about like how they'll motivate them to just stay active and move. You know, obviously it's going to depend on age. Is the person an older individual? Maybe we just work more on ADLs.
Fuck yeah, Zimba.
Like, I mean, it's so goal dependent. I think the biggest obstacle that I find is I'm a CrossFit trainer in the past, is the CrossFit trainers, because it's like it just seems so dogmatic and like it has to fit within this box. Everything has to be for time. So that's the only difficult group that I find. But as far as what to look for in a trainer, I think you just need to, like Ben was saying, sit down and get to know them personally. Are they reasonable? You know, are they going to listen to the patient and what they need? Are they willing to kind of co-manage back and forth with you? But there's a lot of egos in the training field, and there's also a lot of egos with chiropractors. And I would argue that a lot of trainers know a lot more about movement than not most, but a lot of chiropractors. I think a lot of chiros coming out of school know literally nothing about movement. Obviously, we're a different group, but I still think there's plenty of trainers that I can learn a lot from.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But again, this is a different group, like you said, so those are awesome takeaways for everyone. So kind of moving away from,
Jeremy has something to add.
I'm dying to say this part. You can learn the most about somebody, not even just their philosophy or approach, but how they are as a person if you train with them. So that's my recommendation. Second recommendation, if a guy is on his cell phone texting with his head down, he's definitely not getting clients from me.
Fucking look at that. Just straight to the point. Fucking drop the mic. Let's go.
With them and then lift weights with them.
Yeah.
So kind of moving away from like the rehab side of things, when you guys graduated, went into practice, started your business, what do your typical days look like? How many hours a week are you in practicing? And like, are you able to have a life outside of it? Because here we are, we're just in school forever and forever, and there's like no balance of like having a life and taking care of yourself and family, and who knows what that is. With that, do you guys have like a regular schedule? Did you notice that if you set a time restriction around your weekly schedule, people would fill those slots? Or was your approach more, I'm going to keep my schedule open and then work around patient time opportunities? What does that look like for you guys?
Who's starting this one?
Back to you, buddy. Actually, I have a question for you first. Do you handpick your trainers that you can lift more than, and those are the only ones you work out with?
It's literally it.
Yeah, nice.
No, I'm lucky to be in the gym I'm at, man, for real.
What if the trainer doesn't lift?
Ooh.
Not getting anybody. But yeah, no, when I first started, obviously, like I said, I started from scratch. So there was very big gaps. And in the beginning, I made the mistake of having like an 8 a.m. and then like a 5 p.m. As I got older and wiser and chubbier, I started to put these in better blocks. So that it would make my schedule to do like admin stuff and marketing in like the morning, and then like later afternoon I would do just clients. And then as the schedule filled up, I would make a block schedule. So Thursday 8 to 10 it would be clients. Maybe the next 2 hours would be like my admin stuff, and then a lift, and then more clients, and then dinner. That just goes how it goes. But I try to make a block schedule and make time for the important stuff, which is marketing and admin stuff and all the stuff you need to do for a business, which is a lot more than I thought. So even when you think you're off, AKA not treating, that's actually the easiest part of the job, is treating. All the other stuff you have to make time for, and you're never really off because you're always doing something for the business.
Yeah, and in the total flip side of that, when you don't own the business, you have a little bit more freedom. But I would say I had two very different experiences with this, because the first place I was at, like I kind of said before, was high volume. So I didn't have any problems filling a schedule. And when a clinic is that busy, it doesn't matter what hours you have available, people will book with you. It doesn't, like, you don't have to cater to the after work crowd, because if you're that busy and people want to come see you and they believe in what you do, they will take time and come and book with you. So at the beginning, for the first couple of months, I was probably working 25 to 30 hours a week in like 6-hour blocks. Basically, I would just alternate mornings and afternoons, and then I would work a Saturday, and I would just have Sunday, Monday off, kind of thing. And it would be pretty much like we do. I mean, it changes person to person, but for the most part, I'm like a 45-minute initial and a 20 to 30 follow-up. Sometimes the initials will be a little bit longer, but that's kind of my blocks. Now, when I went to the new clinic, this clinic I'm in, most of our patient base comes from word of mouth referral. We didn't really start doing a whole lot of marketing until COVID and everything. So I opened up my schedule a lot more. So I opened my schedule up for hours, but the nice part about Jane, and I'm not sure if these guys are on Jane, is online. If you do online booking, you can make it look like your schedule is only available for blocks. So technically my schedule would be open all day for any last minute calls, cold calls, if somebody needed to get in. But online, people would only be able to see that I was open for blocks. And that always looks better in terms of a patient trying to book in. So even though I was maybe scheduled for 40 hours in the week, Monday to Friday, I'd probably only be, in the clinic for that 25 to 30-ish hours. And then the nice part is with when you have like an independent contract like myself, is I don't have to worry about the marketing necessarily. sorry, Tara. Yeah, Jane's an EHR. I just saw the question, but I don't really have to worry about a whole lot of marketing outside of, you know, whatever I want to do for my own little practice, because I'm just building one inside of an established clinic basically, and I get new patients that come into the clinic even if they don't like want to call or book with me specifically. So for me, when I'm off, like today I was off at like 2:00. When I'm off, I'm off. You know, I maybe spend a couple extra minutes at the end of the day finishing charts, but for the most part, with everything, I'm done. And I go home and I've got that whole afternoon to work out, make food, you know, in a normal year, hang out with somebody other than myself. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I use Jane too. I love Jane. I know Jeremy used to use it and he found something he likes better. From day one, I decided I was going to work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Because I wanted to do other shit and I have a life outside of practice. I don't live to work. And what I did was I only gave patients 1 or 2 time options. So I did do the same thing that Ben was talking about, is make me look busy. It's literally a check mark and you can hit it and it'll give you like, it's basically like cluster booking. So if you have a patient booked at 9 or something, it'll only show maybe like 9:30 and 10. And then later in the afternoon, maybe like 3:34. But you can also just go in and say, I'm booking out 12 to 5, and it's going to make me look like nothing's available. And then I'm only going to be, you know, in office for the middle part of the day. But basically what I did is, like I said, I only gave patients 1 or 2 options, even though I had like 30. And they make it work, right? They make it work. They can come in and see you. And if it doesn't work that day, it'll work the next day. So that's been great because currently my schedule is about 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, with a 2 to 3 hour block somewhere in the afternoon for lunch and a workout and some admin stuff, catch up on notes, etc. Sometimes I will only work 2.5 days. Sometimes I'll work 3.5 days. Every once in a while, I'll come in on a Friday if needed.
Wow, sounds like you guys got the perfect schedules. This maybe isn't a question for Ben, but what are your marketing strategies and what do you find works the best? Like, what has been the tool? Is it Instagram? Is it social media? Like, is it word of mouth? Like, how do you generate incoming patients and or get it more interaction? I know TikTok's like a hot new thing. I'm not on it, so I don't know. Maybe that's a thing, but
unfortunately, I got to get on that too. Damn it. I don't want to, but
I had a patient ask me if I was old enough to even know what it was. I was so offended.
Yeah, I got to buy a Y strap. Just kidding, Kyle.
That's the regret in there.
I think the most important thing is having the conversation at the end of sessions, which I was never good at until probably past couple months, is, hey, if you enjoyed my set, like if you're enjoying your time with me, please leave me a review. It means a lot to me and it helps me more than you can understand, because it really does with like website stuff. And if you know anybody that, you know, can use any type of service like this, please let them know. So word of mouth, and then building up your company on Instagram has been huge for me. I've gotten clients from literally around the world just from Instagram, and networking with people on Instagram. So that's been good. And what else has helped? I don't do the typical stuff. I don't do a weekly newsletter. I don't email people constantly. I just don't have it in me. I don't have ClickFunnels. I just do everything basically old school. So you don't have to do all that crazy stuff. I'm living proof.
Yeah, I had all this vision of creating ClickFunnels and weekly newsletters and all the stuff that Sebastian does. And I just really haven't needed to. I think, you build a brand on Instagram, like Jeremy said. A lot of people from Instagram. The biggest thing for me, I think, is just putting yourself in the right space. And I think both of us got really lucky in that sense. I put myself in a gym that's really well known, and that has 1,500 active members. So I don't really have to do much, and it's pretty much all word of mouth, because I think I really take the time to let people know that I'm listening and that I care and that I have their best interests in mind. And if I can't help them, I will really do my best to get them to the person that can. And I think that goes a long way. They send you friends, they send you family members. If you can somehow get in with CrossFit gym owners, and treat them, whether it's for free or at a big discount, and if you have good success with them, they really send you everyone, because all their people are hurting. All of their people are paying a premium to work out there. So if you're doing the cash-based model, most of them don't mind coming and paying you. And the most important thing in their life is usually working out. So can you get them back to working out? Whatever the cost is, they're willing to pay it. So that's been a big one. I get people from, I'm in Reno, there's a couple surrounding cities, Fallon and Fernley, and I get people driving for like an hour or so to come see me. Probably at least a couple referrals every week just from treating one CrossFit gym owner. And he happens to be a CrossFit Games athlete, so that was a lucky connection too.
I can actually speak quite a bit on this, surprisingly, because of my situation. But our clinic, most of the marketing that we used to do was at events. So any local events that were happening, we'd be there. And a lot of our old marketing was just face-to-face kind of chatting. Obviously with COVID, that kind of changed everything. So our whole clinic kind of went through a whole lot of different experiments in terms of marketing and stuff. And we tried, like, targeted Facebook ads. We tried Instagram ads. And for me, Instagram wasn't worth it, in that the amount of time I would have had to put in to maintain a relevant Instagram was just not something that I wanted to do. So what we found is, essentially, when you aren't good at it, let somebody else do it for you. And the website's huge. So getting yourself on Google to be like some of the first pages when somebody Googles like chiropractor Kelowna or chiropractor Reno, what gets you on the front page is certain tag words in your website and all that stuff. And you could dive into those analytics on your own if you wanted to, or you could get somebody to do it for you. And that obviously costs money, but in terms of time invested to return, I personally didn't find that Instagram was a viable option for me, because I didn't want to put in all that time to make good Instagram videos and follow up with it. That just wasn't what I wanted to do. And the TikTok thing, I'm not gonna be there. But for us, what has worked out is we paired up with a local company that does a lot of promotional stuff, and they essentially take care of a lot of that for us. And it's $1,500 a month for the entire clinic. That covers every provider that's in it. That's pretty reasonable. And they do promotional, videos and stuff like that for us. And that's something that we found to be a little bit more worth our while. And for me personally, throughout the year, I'd throw, a little bit of money into some targeted ads or whatever. And you get a lot of clicks. A lot of people click on it, but you don't get a lot of people that actually physically come into the clinic. And that was a new challenge for us with COVID and everything. Was we couldn't be face-to-face, doing the stuff, being out in the community. But kind of like what Kyle said is, having somebody that's an owner of some sort of location that has a lot of members is super, super valuable. We have a couple places like that, and that helps. But yeah.
Awesome. So I'm looking forward to you guys' TikTok videos. We are super grateful for you guys spending the time with us. I just kind of want to wrap it up with one final question. If anyone else has questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat now. But because a lot of these people on this call are students, I think they're young too, in clinic or student clinic at least. What is something that you wish you would have done more or focused on more in school? Because I feel like with you guys, you had a lot of external influences, like whether it's seminars or training or things that got you involved outside of school. And I'm assuming maybe school wasn't like the biggest learning curve for you guys. So is there anything that you would recommend, or if you could go back in time and be in school, that you would maybe direct your focus on and do during school for these younger students?
One big one that I always say to people that come chat with me is definitely like give your effort in school, but I overdid it like big time. And for what? Like for the A? Yeah, I mean, like I wish I spent more time enjoying, because I was in Southern Cal. Whole first year, my best friend was out there and I saw him 3 times. So enjoy, like separate church and state. Enjoy life a little bit. Don't overdo it. And when you do overdo it, do something that's going to actually benefit your career and not study biochem for 5 hours straight. Like do courses and things that are going to make you a better clinician. And you know, seminars are out there. Finding a good mentor is massive. And then getting in a good network of people helped me tremendously as well.
Yeah, and that's a tough question because I feel like a lot of the things that I wasn't very good at were things that you just kind of inevitably aren't going to be very good at first thing into practice. So one of the things that I found that I really struggled with early on was undertreating and struggling to get somebody to come back in a little bit more frequently than maybe the beautiful world would allow. But that's something you could try practicing in student clinic. I obviously, Tosh, but I did the clerkship through the VA, so I didn't really have student clinic. I was like basically in hospital settings for the entire time. So for me, I saw a lot of people, I saw a lot of volume, I saw a lot of crazy cases. So all that stuff I didn't really have a lot of worry with, but I found when I got to, the real world, it was, managing and stuff like that, and managing a patient yourself and being okay to tell them to come in again. So I would say when you get to student clinic, if you have somebody that's, clearly in a lot of pain or whatever, you'd be okay to see them a little bit more than maybe you think you should, at least at the beginning. And that's totally fine. That person wants to get better and they're not going to think that you're a traditional straight chiro if you want to see them one more time. And then everything else Jeremy said is so crucial. Like that was one thing that I was lucky to learn a little earlier. Same thing, first year, it was all about keeping on the dean's list, blah, blah, blah. Like then you realize that it's chiro school and nobody gives a shit. But, as soon as I started going out to continuing ed and just getting involved in the things that I like, mentally, I was so much more happy. And that makes you just, inevitably, that's just going to make you better when it comes to relating to people and talking to people and stuff like that. So enjoy your time. Just understand that you're going to be fine and you're going to suck at the beginning, and that's just how it goes. Like that's just part of the process. You're not going to graduate school and kill it, and just be okay with that and just understand that there's going to be more learning. It's always learning.
Yeah, I would say one thing that I did really well during school that I'd recommend doing would be shadow all types of different practices and doctors. If you know you're going to be kind of practicing more like we do, more movement based, I'd still go to all those PI clinics. Go down to Newport and see 𝘵𝘰𝘬𝘬 in his really high volume philosophical practice. Because one thing you can learn from those people, which I think is very valuable, is they have a fuck ton of passion. And man, they really know how to sell. So like, obviously we're not going to have the same philosophy then, but there's something to be learned from everyone. One thing that I did really poorly, and Jeremy talked about this, was I'm a perfectionist to my core. So I got straight A's throughout all of chiropractic school. But to get straight A's, and I'm not saying I'm the smartest, I just worked my ass off, but to get straight A's, you have to sacrifice so much other important stuff, which is relationships, and also being out in the field, taking seminars, and finding good mentors. And when you get into practice and you have your plaque up on the wall, no one gives a shit that it says summa cum laude or whatever. They're not looking at that. Just get the degree and get out of school what I think is most important. And another one is learning how to critically appraise the research. And whether or not you get that in school or not, try and do that during school, because then I think you'll be able to realize that a lot of the stuff the teachers are telling you is bullshit. And maybe you can already kind of start to form your own way of practicing rather than having to do that outside of practice when you realize what was taught to you in school probably isn't the best source of information.
I worked with a chiropractor before going into school, and it was a high volume PI clinic, 80 to 100 people a day. And his father was a chiropractor. So I had some big time biases going to school. So just try to challenge those biases, keep an open mind, and like both of them said, just keep on learning.
I think kind of what they touched, like learning how you don't want to practice is almost maybe more valuable than watching somebody practice the way you want to practice at the end of the day. So don't like not shadow somebody because you heard that they do some weird shit. But do they, like, are they successful? Yeah, they have a very good, business model. They make a lot of money, whatever, blah, 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 whatever your goals are. That shouldn't prevent you from shadowing somebody, because just because you shadow somebody doesn't mean that you're going to be like them, but you're going to learn a lot from how they sell whatever it is. And you're going to sit there and you're like, how on earth did this person just believe what that person just told them? And it's super, super valuable.
And I just had a question, because you guys all kind of mentioned it throughout your answers, but either during school or maybe after you graduated, like what was like the top 1 or 2 most impactful like courses or seminars that you took that you recommend to some of these students here?
We go in order.
Oh man, that's so tough. Honestly, the first one for me, not even most recent, the first one was Philip Snell's Fix Your Own Back. That I was the only student in that seminar. And thankfully for that reason, I got taken under basically all their wings. And that opened my eyes up big time, changed my perspective on how to treat people. Definitely made me more active based and gave me the confidence to start loading people way sooner than I was shadowing other people and watching them do it. So that course definitely gave me confidence. That's tough. I never took neurodynamics, but I know Kyle did, and he spoke very highly of it. I have the textbook, which I know isn't the same, but I've learned from other practitioners, and I think that one's very valuable as well.
On that note, I just want to interrupt real quick, because R2P does have a relationship with Snell, and we're in contact with him quite frequently. I know that Chris is on here as well, but we do have that course available for all of the students at a super discounted rate. And I don't think that you guys should miss out on it. I've also taken it myself, and especially since Jeremy just said that, and I'm assuming Ben might say the same thing, but it's a very valuable course. So if any of you students on this call have not taken that course, it's virtual, and it's the 19th and 20th of December. So really no excuse to miss out. Everyone's done with finals, at least at Palmer West, and actually learn some stuff and to apply to practice. But continue, Ben.
Yeah, well, I mean, the nice thing about Snell's course is that it really takes you from start to finish. And if you haven't got into clinic yet and you don't have like a clinical process or anything like that, it takes you on that that journey basically from history through to treatment and rehab. And it's really, really helpful to see that. I didn't take that course until I was nearly graduated. So it was a little bit of a different experience for me, but it's still great. And Snell is one of the guys you can count on. Like the night before I took the course, he had changed all the slides because there was some new paper that just got published that changed some of his ideas. Like he's just great for that. But something that I know Tosh knows that we worked on a lot was getting a bit of a, I think everybody's super excited to take continuing education, but you got to take it, in my opinion, at the right time. If you were to take neurodynamics in like the first year, it's going to be so far over your head. You're not going to have any clue what's going on. Don't worry about it. I will say though, that is probably the best course I've ever taken. I took the full combo course, and Shacklock is just the man. And it just makes you so much more comfortable with really like intense, weird nerve stuff and disc stuff. Like it's just, anytime you have a non-responder, you have that kind of neurodynamics to turn to try. You know, it's just another avenue to try for these really weird cases. But I'd say neurodynamics is definitely up there for one of the best courses that I ever took. And then, you know, all the other stuff is great too. It's just all different tools. But I think by far, like the one thing that, I mean, I still have to go, I always like judge a course by, did I just learn it in a weekend and I was good and I got it? Or is it something that I have to go back to all the time because it was something that was like super, super in depth? And I literally have, like, I'm not even joking, I didn't pull this out for any show, but I literally have the neurodynamics book right here because it's something that I look at often. Like it's literally just something that I go back and I'm like, okay, did I literally do everything that I could? Did I differentiate it right? Did I offload right? Whatever. It's just such a cool course.
I think Shacklock's super humbling and like the nicest guy I've ever met and talked to. So I think like you'd want to keep looking at it because you're like, I can't let him down. I can't just.
Yeah.
What is? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Fix Your Own Back was great. I love Phil Snell. I took it twice. And I think the biggest thing that I got from it was actually his communication is just fantastic. And the way that he presents the information to us, but also in his patient simulation is just unreal. And then also that course, it seems like it brings a lot of cool people together. So met some good people. One of them being Geronimo, which he's a student and Jeremy knows him really well. And he's out in Florida and he sends me research papers every week that completely challenge my bias. So I think the relationships at these seminars and conferences are actually maybe even more important than the content itself. Neurodynamics, I went and took it. I went and took it at Brett Winchester's place, the full upper and lower. And I don't know if I feel quite as strongly about it as Ben does. It's very complex, but I don't think I use it as much as I thought I would. I think the biggest thing from it is, like he said, some of those non-responders or those weird cases where maybe you wouldn't have the tools to do some magic. Sometimes it's like a magic trick, and you know, that's where I see the value in it. But as far as like top courses during school, I don't know if I'd recommend it. I would probably take it right towards the end of school or maybe in the first few months.
Totally.
You can time it going into practice so you can immediately apply it.
I just wanted to say another thing. It reminded me of the previous question. I think, what would you do more of when you were still in school? And one thing that I don't know if it's just COVID or what, but one thing that I find has been very consistent with people has been the psychological aspect of pain, and getting into reading, you know, like anything on pain, you know, like Pain Reframed is a good podcast, but Explore Pain is a great book to read. But most of the people I've been seeing recently, almost like it's almost gone to this point where I've wanted to start recording it because it's something that I want to like actually start logging, is the amount of people that I see that are on some sort of antidepressant that have chronic low back pain. Like it's just a thing that's huge, and maybe that's just the demographic that I'm in, but to learn more about the conversation to have with those people. And Kyle seems like he's done a lot of it too, just with how he talks, right? He talks about active listening, letting the person speak about everything. Like all that is an experience, and learning how to shift the focus maybe away from the pain conversation while you're still addressing it, but also focusing on things that are going to help them mentally is really, really huge. And that's not something that you're really taught, but like I just had a lady today, for example, who her husband just passed away. You know, she comes in, it's the first day, she talks about everything in her life going on. And then you're kind of like, well, you put like low back pain on your thing. Like, are you going to tell me about your low back pain? And it's like, how do you go about talking to that person and realizing that like, there's so much more going on up top than there is physically going on with them. So I think any sort of reading, like Gift of Injury is a great book. Explain Pain is a great book, you know, things like that, where you can get into learning how to explain that stuff to people, but also understanding the mechanisms behind it is something that I wish that I did more of when I was in school, for sure.
Another course that I'd recommend that you're talking about that would be Greg Lehman's Reconciling Biomechanics. Or just try and listen to every single podcast that he's ever been on. Ben Cormack's a good one. I really like the way that Greg thinks. It might challenge a lot of your bias. It challenges mine every time I listen to him. But I actually, I was treating my mom for low back pain, and you know, one of my only failed cases, and I set up an appointment with him virtually, and it's actually tomorrow morning. So that's how much I respect the guy. And I wish that it had been yesterday so I could tell you how it went, but he's a good guy to follow, because I really think he critically thinks and peels apart every layer possible. And he doesn't close off any type of treatment. He's not anti-manual therapy. He's not anti this and that. He thinks it all has a place.
I think I see Austin asked me a question. How many neurodynamic cases have I seen? So tough question, but basically it's part of my exam. I always do some sort of neurodynamic aspect of my exam, whether it's just changing the slump to adding in, you know, the certain offloads with the neck and stuff. And there's, in my opinion, anybody that's responded, McKenzie is a great course too. If you haven't done McKenzie is a great course for any sort of disc stuff. And it's always a nice one to just have in your back pocket for non-responders. But again, it's one of those courses that you should probably take later on when you're actually seeing patients and you're about to graduate. Because when you're a student, you don't really understand the clinical application. But for me, like if somebody comes in and they're like discogenic low back pain, whatever that spectrum is, whether they're having any pain down the leg or whether they just have discogenic type pain, you know, neurodynamics is going to be a part of that in some sort of fashion, whether it's an opener or whether it's like a nerve glide, something like that, where you have nerve sensitization to that extent. Anytime you can apply some sort of, you know, something, opener, slide, whatever you want to call it, to that, you're just going to help that person feel a little bit better. Because in those cases, they have so much constant pain with certain positions that you need to get them into positions that feel good, right? So it's just one of those things where you can add to your treatment at the beginning, is finding their preference for position and direction. And it just gives you those opportunities to maybe add that in. If, you know, they don't respond to your traditional McKenzie directional preference stuff, okay, well, maybe I'll lie them on their side and we'll start tensioning the lower limb or something like that. Just gives you something else to go on for those people that are just a little bit more complicated. But in general, it's a part of my initial exam for almost all cases. So I wouldn't say I have specific neurodynamic cases. It's just certain people fit neurodynamic treatment approaches, if that makes sense.
I think to piggyback real quick on what Ben was saying with McKenzie and neurodynamics, I think sometimes neurodynamics is almost most useful to rule out a neurodynamic case. And then McKinsey, like let's just say it's an elbow. If you feel like you can rule out neurodynamics, and then you kind of have some tools with McKinsey for an elbow. The extremities is less known about, but sometimes the extremities is even more magical than the spine McKinsey stuff. So combining those two is great. And then obviously a lot of times neither are going to help and you got to come up with something else. But
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know we're approaching almost 2 hours, so I don't want to take anyone's time up. But is there any way that people can, or the best way for people to reach out to you guys if they have any further questions, or maybe they want to shadow you guys where you're at? Go ahead and let people know the best way to get a hold of you guys.
Best way for me is on Instagram. It's where I get a lot of people who want to shadow me anyway. And that's RSM, Resilience Strength Movement _athlete_doc. And I'm in New Jersey, Central Jersey, Jersey Shore.
For me, any way is easy. These guys can share my email address. That's totally fine with me. But Instagram, that's been tagged and I'll post is just my last name with a couple eyes because I thought that was cheeky. But Instagram or Facebook, nothing's out of the question. I'll respond to everything.
yeah, Instagram works well. It's at Movement RX, and that's abbreviated MVMT RX. You'll find a lot of adjusting videos on there for your viewing pleasure. So you can see that I appear to maybe be a straight chiropractor, but I'm not.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being on here. I hope all the students on here learned a lot. And if you do have any questions, you can reach out to any of the R2P pages or directly to them as well. We'll be happy to direct you guys.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. If anybody has any questions ever, feel free to reach out. I'm always answering my phone 24/7.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on a call with any of you guys too and shoot you my number, as I'm sure these other two are too.
Yeah, ditto.
Thank you guys for having us. Is this the first one? Or have you guys been doing this every day? First one.
Far high.
This is huge.
Yeah, I don't know why you guys included me in this group, but hopefully something I shared was of a little helpful.
Don't let him fool you. He's really good at the Y strap.
It takes a lot of skill, I'll tell you that.
I think you need a thermography poster to go on that left side of you. You got a blank space on that wall. You have a nice little spine poster.
Seriously, thank you guys. It was an awesome conversation. And Ben, nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys too. Nice to be the lone Palmer West rep.
She's representing.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right,
Good to
guys.
see you, Kyle.
Good to see you, buddy.
See you, Jared.
See you, Jeremy. Thanks,
Bye, guys.
Kyle. Thanks for coming.
Take care.
You too. Thank you. Dr. Bennett, it's nice meeting you too. Oh. I'll go fuck myself.
Nice. Did you end the recording or did you get that in there?
Still recording.